Hello everyone, that Manga Kid here to do another manga discussion video, this time on Paradise Kiss by Ai Yazawa. This is not a review. I do have a review of this series on my channel that is pretty much as spoiler free as I can get. But this video is going to be going in depth into the entirety of this story, so if you do not want spoilers, I suggest you check out my review video and come back to this one if you're still interested once you've actually consumed the series, or if you do not care about spoilers, then continue watching. I have the 3-volume vertical edition of Paradise Kiss. It has been released many times. The most recent is the vertical edition all-in-one giant book. But I already owned this edition, so there was no point in me buying the giant collector's edition. It was also released way back when by Tokyopop in, I believe, 2 different editions, potentially 3, but at least 2, because they had a purple spine edition and they also had like a silvery spine edition as well. So anyway, just so that you're clear on where I got this particular style of book if you're not familiar with this edition. Anyway, Paradise Kiss is one of my favorite stories, truly and honestly. I watched the anime for it initially when I was a teenager. And the anime is so wonderful. Same story. It's pretty much word for word. But the music and the atmosphere and everything about it, I just love. And it wasn't until I really started collecting manga that I, was like, well, I'd really like to own the manga because the anime is very difficult to purchase, for a reasonable price. And so I figured, well, I'll buy the manga, and I did, and I really loved it. It was almost word for word. If I could own the anime, I would also own that, but I can't get my hands on it at the moment, so the manga will have to do. And I think I've read the manga now maybe 3 times. So I've consumed the story several times. And every time I read it, I think I'm not going to like it anymore for some reason. I feel like because it's a story about teenagers that, and it's kind of overly dramatic, that I'm going to outgrow it, I guess. But every time I read it, I just fall in love with all these characters again. And I find more stuff that I didn't notice the first time or the second time or the third time. And this is one that, despite the decent amount of text, it's a very quick read for me because I just am so consumed by everything that's happening. And so we start off with Yukari, who is a high school senior. She is at a very prestigious private school. She's trying to impress her mother because her mom has very high expectations of her children and their education, and she's failing pretty much. She's not doing well academically, and she's trying to gear up for college entrance exams. And it's very difficult to do that when you're not doing very well in any of your classes and your teachers are constantly on you about how your grades are failing or dropping, and that your mother is constantly expecting you to be studying all the time. And so she's just feeling very lost because she doesn't like school, but she has to like it to impress her mother, who she is losing respect with. Her mother is just losing confidence in her, basically. And her younger brother, who's like in grade school, is a genius. He is acing everything and he doesn't really have to try. Whereas with Yukari, she's trying her best and she can't make results. And so she happens upon our kind of main cast of characters who are from Yaza Arts. It is a kind of fashion art school, high school. And so she meets our other characters here. We've got Arashi, who initially scouts her, and we've got Miwako, who is Arashi's girlfriend, and then we've also got Isabella as well. I don't think... Oh yes, there's Isabella there. So Yukari is on her way to cram school, and Arashi is like, you should be, come with me kind of thing, and he scouts her to be a model for their upcoming fashion show where they're designing clothing for. And she is kind of uppity and is like, I've got a lot going on. I don't have time to play around with you. And Arashi gets really pissed off because, he's like, what, your exams are so much better than what we're doing. Like, we're just as serious as you. We're just not, taking college entrance exams. We're doing something tangible. We're making clothing. We're working towards a dream. And, this is the first time that she's really been seeing anybody who is, not specifically focused on the college route, but who is totally passionate and has a plan for their life that just doesn't involve school, which is what she's always been told is the thing that she should be striving for. And so we quickly learn that there's this boy in her class, Tokumori, who she really likes. He's like gets the top grades. He's really gorgeous, whatever. And we find out she has a crush on him. And that happens fairly quickly at the beginning. But she's trying to focus on school. She's trying to focus on this boy that she likes. And she's, for some reason, can't get these Yaza art kids out of her head. So it turns out she forgot her, She forgot her student ID at the atelier where the Yaza art kids hang out. And so George, this gorgeous bisexual kind of prince of Yaza arts, head designer for Paradise Kiss, their clothing line that they're trying to design things for. He starts his train of manipulation by, going and meeting her at the library on a Sunday. And, we think at first we're like, oh, it's a coincidence, but it's not. He called her house and her brother told him where she would be, and he goes and makes it out to be some sort of coincidence, which she eventually finds out is untrue. But this is the beginning of his kind of manipulative behavior of, he runs into her in the library and then he just goes and sits at another table and then, gets her to be interested in him. And, as you read through Paradise Kiss or watch through it or however you consume it, the characters in this story, there's a lot of abusive and manipulative behavior happening. There is legitimate sexual assault that ends up, we learn happened in the past amongst some characters. And you read it and you're like, these people are so bad for each other. Like, why can't they see that? But at the same time, you're just consistently rooting for them. And as a grown adult who knows, about manipulative relationships, and you just are like, I know realistically that these people should stay the hell away from each other, but it just makes for a really good story. I don't know what, Ai Yazawa is just really good at writing complicated relationships and characters. And so anyway, we learn that Tokumori, the guy that Akari likes, is childhood friends with Miwako and Arashi. And we very quickly learn that Miwako has been sandwiched between the two boys her whole life, and she ended up choosing Arashi, which meant that Tokumori needed to get out of the picture. And so when he went to his fancy private school and they went to Yaza Arts, they kind of separated ways. But we learned that Miwako is still in love with Tokumori just as much as she is Arashi. And, Miwako is not very mature. In fact, she's quite immature. And so throughout the story, you're watching Yukari kind of asking her, but who do you love, though? Why did you choose Arashi? What was the difference between him and Tokumori, and what made you ultimately choose Arashi? And so this is an ongoing kind of theme of how did she get sandwiched between these two, and how did she make her choice, which we obviously find out later why she made that choice. And so, Yukari kind of confronts Tokumori the next day because she had set up that meeting with Miwako and him, and she wants to know how it went. And she's kind of realizing at this point that she doesn't have much feelings for Tokumori anymore, and that she's sort of thinking about George a lot. And so she's sort of starting to see George a bit, but he's kind of playing around with her feelings and she can't really figure him out. And we're at the point here where George kind of confronts her about her behavior because she's been lying to her parents. She goes to the atelier after school rather than her cram school. She's still not working on her studying. She's getting more and more involved with the Yaza Arts kids because she's agreed to be their model. And George, he says, your poor mom having her daughter lie to her and then just say hateful things about her after you get off the phone with her from lying. And Yukari's like, well, whose fault is that? And he's like, now you're blaming me. Either you have to study because your parents are nagging you about it, or you blame me for manipulating you into not studying. Do you mean you have no free will? And this is the first kind of time that George, or anybody really, is like, you're a person. Yes, you're still technically a kid. You're like 18 or 17 or whatever. You're still in school. You're almost done school. But where is your personality? Where's your free will? You don't have to be the kid that your mom wants you to be. You have the opportunity to stand up to her and make your own choices. Why are you skirting around your life by lying to her now? There's something that you want to be doing, then do it. Like, don't pretend that it's anybody else's fault that you want to do what you want to do. It's your decision, it's your life, and if you decide to make that decision to not go to cram school or not study, then that's your decision, and you should be owning that decision, not blaming, your mother for the pressure she's putting on you, or blaming the kids at the atelier for distracting you from your studying. And I think this is a really important kind of message that this story has, is that we have this girl who is so lost and she's finally found something that interests her, but she doesn't have the courage to take ownership of that. She doesn't have the courage to tell her family. She doesn't have the courage to also, take responsibility for those feelings and be like, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to execute it. Instead, she would rather just skirt the responsibilities of school and her cram school as well, her college entrance exams and all that, that she's been working towards her whole life, but for somebody else, her mother. And now she's like, oh, I found an out. If I go and do this stuff with the Yaza Arts kids, then I feel like I have purpose, I'm having fun, and I don't have to worry about anything else. But she's not taking responsibility for the fact that she should still be graduating high school, and she can still go to school and graduate at the same time, work towards her goal of, getting into the fashion industry if that's what she really wants. And she's just not taking ownership, and she's being kind of wishy-washy, and George is not a fan of that. We learn later that's because his mother is very much the same. Expects other people to do things for her or tell her what to do, and just doesn't take responsibility for her actions. And Yukari notices that later of like, oh, my behavior reminded George of his mother, which he, doesn't like her behavior. So that's why he gets so frustrated with her decision making or lack thereof. So we see her now at the beginning of, or kind of into the middle of volume 2, that she's thinking really hard about all this stuff, about how Arashi and Miwako and George and everybody at the atelier, they're talented, they have hopes and aspirations and dreams that they've been working towards just as hard as any of the kids at her school are towards studying. But she sees a passion in them that she's never seen before. The people she's around are studying because they're told that that's what they're supposed to be doing. And maybe they do enjoy studying, I don't know. But for the most part, the kids at school have their heads down in their books and they do what they're supposed to be doing. And then they're going to go to a college or university, and then they're going to get jobs, and they're going to sit in an office every day, and they're going to get a paycheck and go home to their family, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas these Yaza art kids have a fire in their eyes that she's just not used to. And so she's like, what was I striving for each day? Who was I living for? Because she's realizing these kids are living for their dreams and their passion, not anybody else's expectations. And I think this is such a key, you know, vibe of this whole story. And why I love it so much is that you're watching somebody who has lived for other people's expectations her whole life and has never really thought about what she wants. You're seeing her kind of witness these people who are so self-indulgent, to an almost, to a degree that is almost a bit too far. And you have that juxtaposition between her life as it used to be and the life that she is watching these Yaza art kids live. And she wants it so bad, but she doesn't know anything about the industry. So she wants to learn and she wants to get involved. And she's realizing, you know, that she can be really pretty. She's never really put much thought or effort into her appearance. And I would like to point out too that, you know, this is a fashion thing, and she gets into the modeling industry and, you know, it's about beauty and physical beauty and all that kind of stuff and whatever. But there's so much deeper, like, messages and stuff going on in this story that I love so much, that even though it is about, you know, this girl who has never really had much attention before, all of a sudden getting attention because people are like, oh, you're so tall, you're so beautiful, you're so, you know, skinny and whatever. Like, that's fine, whatever. But it doesn't feel like an overpowering part of the story. The key part of this is that this girl is lost and she's trying to find her way, and she's doing it so incorrectly. But that is part of life, is making those mistakes, and she just doesn't know where to go from here because she's had her life planned out for her by someone else her whole life, and she had thought that she was going to continue on that path. She thought she was going to just go to the school her mom wants her to go to, and then get a job her mom approves of, start a family her mom approves of, and live that life. And now all of a sudden she's like, wait, I have more control over this. And I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. And whatever the hell I want includes running away, moving in with my boyfriend, having sex with my new boyfriend, and starting to be a fashion model, and skipping school. And it's just like you're watching this train wreck happen and you're like, oh man, there are so many ways you could have gone about this that didn't go to this extreme. But at the same time, you're like, you know what? I think she needed to make these mistakes because she just has never rebelled before, and she's just never stood up. Like, she's just not mature enough to have that conversation with her mother yet. And, you know, it's so fascinating to watch the train wreck happen, and it is lovely to see how loving and supportive, you know, Arashi and Miwako and Isabella and George are. I mean, George is a little iffy, but, you know, for the most part, they're very supportive of her, and they're like, yeah, like, you could do this if you put the effort in. And we do enjoy your company. And these are people she just met. Like, this story only really takes place over a certain amount of months. And it's just really nice to see that she finds these people and she just kind of falls in with this group. And they just wholeheartedly kind of accept her into that group. Yeah, so this part here where we see, you know, we know that George's mother is the second, you know, she's the mistress of his father, who's a very rich man. And we see this moment where they're, you know, she's telling her friend, oh, I'm going to break up with the asshole now. Like, it's time. It's been, you know, decades now. And I'm just like, I'm ready to put him at the curb. And then he shows up and she's like, there he is. There's that guy. Love him. And her friend's like, yeah, I saw this coming. And it's just so much like, you see why George is so irritable with flippant women, because he just is not, he's just lived with his mom his whole life, where he just can't handle that kind of behavior. So we see the competition that Yukari had agreed to model in. We see that take place, and Parakis, George's dress that everybody helped with, gets second place. And Yukari at their little celebratory dinner party situation is pissed off that they lost. She's like, oh, you guys put in so much effort and you guys lost, and everybody else is just trying to have a good time. And she also, because at this point she's told her mother that, you know, she wants to be a model, she was hoping that if they won the Grand Prix, then it would be some kind of trophy that she could bring home to her mom and be like, look, you know, this is a successful path. But because they didn't win, she's like, oh, I could have won that battle with my mom. And George is like, please stop complaining in front of everybody who worked so hard to make the show a success. She's like, oh, I wasn't doing that. And he's like, yeah, you were. He's like, he then tells her that his name is the only one on the dress. Even though everybody else helped, his name is the only one. He would be the only one who gets to study abroad. Everybody helped because they wanted to. They believed in it and they helped, and she's shitting on all their effort by complaining that they didn't win. And it just, you know, that moment where he says, you know, Miwako said he called the dress our dress. Our dress was the loveliest. And he's like, that was the, you know, it was something we all created together. And he takes the burden on himself. He's like, I was the designer. You guys all helped me. It's my fault we didn't win. It's not anybody else's fault. And it just is like, you just see how supportive they all are of George's vision. And that's another thing about this whole story, is that, you know, George is a weirdo. They're all weirdos. But George is particularly, you know, uppity and kind of self-indulgent, very self-indulgent. And Arashi, who makes fun of him constantly and is like, God, you're creeping me out, man. Like, you're such a creep. But at the end of the day, they all really love him. And you can see throughout the series when Yukari's like, is everybody just okay with the fact that he just changed the design last minute, or he dragged us around to 1 million stores and never found anything? Like, isn't he wasting our time today? Like, why do you all just put up with it? Because at the end of the day, they just shrug their shoulders and go, well, that's George, you know, we're going to do what he wants to do regardless of how much we complain about it, so we might as well not complain. You can tell that they really believe in his vision. You can tell that they really love him and, you know, respect him as a creator, as a designer. And it's just really nice to see people supporting each other and being like, no, you're really good at what you're doing. Yeah, and then so we see that the person who won the Grand Prix the previous year, she comes back to watch George's, or just to see the show in general, and she's George's friend. And they're sitting down together with Yukari, and George is saying, oh, I'm going to go work for Seiji, the hair and makeup artist, who is a close friend of his. And, you know, I'm going to train as a hair and makeup artist, and that's what I'm going to do. And they're all like, what do you mean? Like, you were going to be a fashion designer. You were going to run Parakits and, you know, but they're not, their works aren't selling. They're trying to get stuff on consignment. They're trying to get stuff into shops or companies to just buy their designs or whatever, or their clothing. And it's just not working out. And he wants to go into a career that he knows he's good at, and that, you know, hair and makeup is number 2 for him. Fashion designing is number 1. But, you know, Yukari and the other girl whose name I don't remember, they're like, no, like, you can't give up on your dream. Like, you need to keep working at this. This is what you've been working towards your whole life. What do you mean you're going to give this up? And it's at this moment, you know, that we see that everybody comes to that point where you need to make that decision for yourself. Are you going to take the easy road, or are you going to take the road that's a bit tougher? And, you know, for George in that moment, he starts realistically thinking about his future and what he will be successful at. And he's like, I would love to be a fashion designer, but I just don't think it's going to work out for me that way. And maybe I'll just take the career that I know I can be successful at and I would still enjoy. And you see the people around him kind of being like, that's so frustrating that this guy that we respect so much is going to sell out. But the other thing I found interesting about this, and this whole story in general, but there's a particular moment where Yukari is like, he's making the biggest decision of his life. And I laughed out loud when I read that, because it's been a couple years since I've read this story. And, you know, as somebody I'm almost 25, and I'm still very young, but this whole story is about, like, we're making the biggest decisions of our lives right now. We're deciding on our career path. We're deciding on where we're going to go to school and what we're going to do. And it makes me laugh so much, because people who are only 17 or 18 years old, and part of this is society's pressure that we put on high school graduates to make a decision about their future. But at the end of the day, that choice you make when you're 18 years old about what career path you want to take is entirely malleable and changeable. You can always reroute yourself at any point in your life. And so for her to be like, George is making the biggest decision of his life in this moment is so funny to me, because he can decide to be a hair and makeup artist right now. And 5 years down the line, he could decide to switch careers. He could start making money as a hair and makeup designer or a hair and makeup artist while he's working on clothing designs, while he's trying to sell his clothing designs to companies. You know, and her thinking that it's now or never, I need to decide to become a model or I need to take college entrance exams. College can always be there. You can be a model for a few years, make some money, experience the industry, and then go to school for something else. And I think that this story really encapsulates, like, the naivete and the like I've been saying before, the self-indulgent nature of young people, of teenagers who are entering into that adult phase in their life where they have all these expectations of what the world is meant to be and what their place in that world is meant to be, without being able to conceptualize that there's so much out there. There are so many different paths you can take. There are so many different ways that you can go and all end up in the same place. Or you can take a million other paths and end up in a million other places. And I think that's why the melodramatic nature of this series really gets me. Because it's just not that serious. Life is just not that serious. But when you're 17 years old and you're on the cusp of being able to make your own decisions, it seems like the biggest of deals. And I think that there's something very special about that point in your life, that very, very, short part of your life where you're just, you're not in your 20s yet, but you're no longer a child. You're no longer, a young teenager. You're a young adult, almost. There's just something so charming about that point. And I think that's what this story really kind of captures so beautifully. So the story ends with George deciding to go to Paris to pursue his career as a designer, We see Isabella go with him. We see Miwako going to work for her older sister's company, Happy Berry. She is also a fashion designer. We see, I don't actually remember what Arashi's plan is. I think he's in a band or something, but I don't think that has anything to do with it. But anyway, we see them all kind of going on their own paths. We see Yukari is going to model. She has an agent. She has booked some gigs. She's on the path to success. Her mother, we see, is very excited about this. She's got pictures of her different gigs all over the walls, and she's showing every single person who comes in their apartment the pictures of her daughter, going, have you heard of this designer? Have you heard of this magazine that my daughter's in? And it's a really charming moment of like, it was never really about the exams. It was about success. It was about having something that her mother could be proud of. And her mom only really ever thought that exams and a good school were what you could brag to people about, and is now realizing there are other ways your children can be successful that are worth bragging about. And so, there's this happy medium where they've kind of come to an understanding. She's like, I can be a successful model, and that's going to be good enough for my mother because there's still something she can brag about. And I just find that kind of funny. Because her mother hasn't really changed. She's just shifted her gears a little bit. And we also see that George leaves the key to a storage container containing all of the clothes that he's designed, and he gives Yukari the key. And she she said, my monochrome world suddenly flooded with rich colors. That's what George's presence meant to me. Even if our paths don't cross again, that alone will never change. And the other thing, like, this series leaves me with that feeling of, people come and go in your life. And there are people that may be there for a very short period of your life that can make such an impact on you and be so, like, such a beautiful moment, no matter how small that moment is. And like I said, this series takes place over only a few short months. And while her relationship with George was very turbulent, and while her time spent with Miwako and Arashi and Isabella and George was quite short, it was so meaningful and impactful and literally changed the entire course of her path. And her desires and her dreams and goals and aspirations all changed because of this interaction she had with these people. And that's how life works. You can think you know where you're going, and then you're introduced to new information, and all of a sudden everything is turned upside down, and you don't know which way is up or down, but you just know that something needs to change. And I love that this story is about young people finding their place in the world within industries that they are passionate about. And it's just so entertaining, and it's funny, and it's heart-wrenching, and it's sweet, and it's horrible, and it's all of these different things all in, a very short amount of pages compared to other longer series that have not achieved what this series, in my opinion, has achieved. And if you have not consumed this story and you've just listened to my ramblings for I don't know what reason, I do highly recommend that you go and pick up Paradise Kiss. I will say there is a bit of homophobia in it, as George is openly bisexual. There are other gay characters as well. This was written in the 90s, I believe, the late 90s. So, there's a bit of that sort of vibe to it of like LGBT people not super accepted at this time. But in the scheme of this world, generally speaking, it is nice to see some openly bisexual and gay characters. There was also a trans character, Isabella, George's childhood friend. She is very much a trans woman. There is a lot of like for the most part, they all treat her as a girl, but they don't really fully understand. And like Yukari, when she meets her, is like, is this person male or female? I don't really understand. And there's just not the language for them to express Isabella's identity or existence, I guess. I don't know. But for the most part, honestly, I've read some other stories that are written nowadays that have worse trans representation than this one does, and LGBT representation just in general. And then, like I mentioned, there's a lot of, that I didn't even get into fully, a lot of manipulative behavior, a lot of, there is, between Miwako and Arashi, we learn that she chose Arashi because he raped her. He decided to take her by force from Tokumori and made the decision for her that he was the one she was going to choose. And, you know, after that incident happened when they were younger, maybe 14 or 15 or whatever, she just, in her kind of naive childlike innocence, went, well, I guess he's the one I'm going to choose, even though I love them both pretty equally. And there's a good scene where Tokumori calls Arashi out on that, and he goes, you took advantage of her. I know that that's what happened. You forced her to have sex with you, and that's why she chose you. And he's like, that's messed up. And it kind of takes Arashi to task to acknowledge what he did. And by the end of it, the three of them are friends again, which I thought was very interesting and also kind of mature on, you know, Tokumori's part and Arashi's as well a little bit, because he does kind of try to take some responsibility and decides that, you know, he's been keeping Miwako away from Tokumori because he didn't want him around her because he was scared he'd lose her. And now he's like, you know what she needs in her life is both of us. And it's not my place to tell her she can't be around you. So there's a lot of intricate relationship stuff happening in this story, and a lot of drama and a lot of, you know, manipulation and behaviors like that, which are certainly over dramatized. But I think that the key core message is, you know, find your people, find the people who will uplift you, who will support you, who will love you and propel you forward with your hopes and dreams and aspirations. And maybe they're only there for a short time, but they can have a huge impact. And you know, this Yukari's going to grow up, and even though she may only be a model for, you know, a decade or so, and then she moves on to a different career path, that moment when Arashi pulls her out of a crowd is going to stick with her for the rest of her life, because that moment changed her course so drastically. And I think that this series can give people hope. If you're feeling like you're in a rut, it can give you hope that there is so much more out there that you may not even know exists yet. And all you have to do is turn the right corner or meet the right person, and a whole new world can open up to you, and a whole new world of possibilities for your future is right there. You just need to go out and find it. And I really, really love Paradise Kiss. And I do, if you've read it and it's been a while, pick it up again. It's so lovely. And I really, really wish we would get Gokinjo Monogatari, the original series that this is a spin-off of, about Miwako's older sister. Because I've seen a bit of the anime for that, and I just fell in love with it just as much. And I really, really wish we would get the manga over here. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But one can dream, I guess. Thank you for watching this extremely long video. I hope that you enjoyed or got something out of this discussion. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say, so thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts about Paradise Kiss in the comments below. Yeah. See ya.